You know, not to toot my own horn or anything, but when it comes to people who count down to Bond 25 here on YouTube, I think it's safe to say that nobody does it better. Let's get started. Today's film is The Spy Who Loved Me, one of the most famous James Bond films. The villainous plot on today's menu is that our villain, Karl Stromberg, has webbed hands. It's a deformity he was born with, and I guess some people picked on him at school. I think he was last to be chosen for the kickball team, because everybody knows people with webbed hands can't kick balls very well, so he has a general disdain for the human race, and his plan is to launch nuclear missiles at New York and Moscow so that he can start a new civilization under the sea in which he will be king. And yes, he decides to call this civilization Atlantis because he's dry for ideas. The theme song for The Spy Who Loved Me is the Carly Simon classic, Nobody Does It Better. And this is one of my all-time favorite James Bond songs. This is such a beautiful song. And I need to preface this because it's very weird. The Roger Moore era skews a different direction when it comes to the music. Sean Connery was all about being an edgy, manly, badass spy man, whereas Roger Moore depicted a slightly softer side of Bond. He was much more charming and romantic. Moore would kiss women's hands, whereas Sean Connery would just kind of slap them and then force himself on them. Jesus Christ. Because Roger Moore gave us this more romantic James Bond, this was reflected in the songs of his era's films. You will notice that the Sean Connery songs were more ominous. They tended to be scarier or more action-driven. They sounded like songs from a spy movie. These songs, however, are just straight-up, soft, tender love songs. Yeah, you get the occasional Moonraker, which we'll go over soon, and The Man with the Golden Gun and whatnot, but the vast majority of Roger Moore's theme songs are just straight-up love songs, because that's the kind of tone they wanted to shift to with Roger Moore's Bond. Case in point, right here, Nobody Does It Better by Carly Simon. And even though I believe that these songs do not mesh well with James Bond at all, and you'll see what I mean as we get into some later movies, all of that notwithstanding, I friggin' love Nobody Does It Better. It's one of the best James Bond songs out there. And every time it comes on, I can't help but sing along. Just a little bit. Of course, we still have a few firsts. This is the first time that new footage of a James Bond actor was filmed specifically for the opening credits. Normally, the opening credits just feature, stylized silhouettes of naked women bodies because this is an Ian Fleming franchise, so of course it does. But this time, they decided to integrate Bond himself into this stylized silhouette Cirque du Soleil that we get accompanying the Carly Simon song. And to sort of give that more oomph, they decided to just straight up film Roger Moore running around pointing guns while the naked silhouettes are dancing around him. It's an interesting little thing, and probably not very necessary, but I thought it was worth note that The Spy Who Loved Me was the first movie that decided to do this, and it stuck. It's a tradition that has stuck around, and I think from this point forward, we always see specifically tailored opening credits footage of all the Bonds in the opening credits. This is also the first time, to my knowledge, that we see the workings of other countries' secret services. Specifically, in this case, Russia. More on that later. But I'm pretty sure we've only ever gotten the inner workings of the British Secret Service up until this point. Finally, this is the first appearance of what is going to be a heavily recurring character, the Russian General Gogol. Gogol is going to show up in, I think it's like 6 more movies after this. Gogol just keeps getting shoved on screen. He is definitely a better recurring character than J.W. Pepper. But he doesn't leave that much of a lasting impact. Consider him kind of like the Thunderbolt Ross of the James Bond cinematic universe. The gadgets in The Spy Who Loved Me tend to skew a little bit more minimal. James Bond has a ticker tape watch that gives him a message, telegram-ish message that spews out of his watch via ticker tape, so I guess that's something. But more importantly, we have the water car. In The Spy Who Loved Me, James Bond drives a sexy white Lotus Esprit, but the Lotus Esprit isn't just a land vehicle, kids. No, where we're going, we don't need roads. James can drive right into the water, and presto changeo, we have a water car. Accompanying James Bond on his adventure is the lady of The Spy Who Loved Me, the woman who I assume is saying the titular sentence out loud to somebody else, Agent Triple X, played by Ringo Starr's wife, the very lovely Barbara Bach. Agent Triple X is cool because despite, her very innuendo-filled name, she is a Secret Service agent working for Russia. She is essentially a Russian version of James Bond, which I think is really neat. Now, yes, they do tend to make the same mistake they always do with these female characters, where they start off being competent, and then the more the movie goes on, the more they rely on James to save them from peril at every turn. But thankfully, she is much more competent than those ladies, and she does tend to get herself out of a few fixes too. So Agent Triple X, kudos for being memorable, and kudos for giving James Bond another Beatles connection, because that's always good. When it comes to the villains of The Spy Who Loved Me, we already talked about our main villain, Karl Stromberg, played by Kurt Jürgen. He is not the most memorable villain, I'm not gonna lie. He's got his webbed hands, at least. That's something. But for the longest time, I would always forget this guy's name. All I knew about him was he was this sort of just chubby, sweater-wearing, rich-looking gentleman who hung out on some kind of weird G.I. Joe fortress in the middle of the ocean. We come for Karl Stromberg, but let's be honest, all of us stay for his henchmen. My friends, meet Jaws. Played by Richard Kiel, Jaws is 7 feet and 2 inches of pure, unadulterated henchman muscle. You can't not love Jaws. The guy has, I don't know, adamantium teeth or something, so everything he bites, he destroys. And he likes to bite. A lot. Jaws is just straight up awesome. He looks like an action figure, and he's got this sort of quiet, lovable doofus mentality to him where you kind of want to see him win. He has that effect on us. And yes, this movie includes a guy named Jaws and a killer great white shark. Was this movie compensating for something? I don't know, but I can tell you that it was almost directed by Steven Spielberg. Yeah. We almost had a Spielberg-directed Bond film, but at the time, he was too busy making Jaws. Not Jaws. Jaws. Which also has a killer... Okay, this is getting weird. Jaws the Henchman is also very unique for James Bond henchmen, but I can't tell you why until tomorrow. The only real death trap in The Spy Who Loved Me involves the aforementioned shark tank. Like I said, Stromberg has a trap door, and when he pushes some buttons with his little webbed fingers, you fall through the trap door into a tank full of sharks, and they eat your face. It's really not that complicated. Between him and Largo and Dr. Kananga, these Bond villains just love their sharks. I hope No Time to Die has a shark in it. Even just one little shark. Just to be like, hey, remember this? Remember when this was a theme? The best quote of the film comes right near the beginning when some bad stuff is going down and MI6 realizes they need James Bond right away. Now, James happens to be in Austria having sex with a lady because that's what he does. So when MI6 has to put out a call to get James into the office, the following exchange happens. An MI6 agent tells M, "He's on a mission, sir, in Austria." And M replies, "Well, tell him to pull out, immediately." British innuendo strikes again. What was the most problematic moment of The Spy Who Loved Me? I think there's a very clear contender here. It's no contest. There's a point where James goes to Egypt, and he meets up with a fellow who's in this tent. He's another British fellow who just has a tent in the middle of the Egyptian desert. And this fellow has a harem of Egyptian women. And this British fellow and Bond just pick their choice of the women in this tent. I'm sorry, everybody. I'm sorry that we have to have a scene where two old white men sit in a tent, lapping up luxury, pointing out Egyptian women who are basically their sex slaves and saying, "You, England, this is why people don't like you. This is why." Right here. I did mention Egypt, though, and we get a lot of Egypt in this film, and it looks great. You get up close and personal with the pyramids and a lot of ancient, crumbling Egyptian temples. I love all of that. We also get to see Sardinia, which is a very beautiful place. James Bond travels to 2 new exotic locales that we have never seen him in before, and it's lovely. I don't think we've ever gone back to Egypt in the James Bond franchise, but I feel like we should. Now, there's a little connection to what happens in On Her Majesty's Secret Service that I think is interesting, question mark. Like I said, they don't do a great job of carrying on the continuity schmontinuity, as far as James Bond is concerned. But when he meets up with Agent Triple X for the first time, Triple X brings up James Bond's previous marriage to a Miss Teresa Di Vincenzo, and Bond gets snippy and sensitive about it. This is one of the few moments where they call attention to Teresa's character. They are few and far between, but they do exist, and I think this is one of the less effective ones, because really, it happened so long ago with an entirely different Bond that it really just feels forced. And I'm personally not a fan of it. I like that they tried to make the attempt, but it was a pretty bad attempt. Just like what they did with the Spectre movie. There's a reason they don't do continuity in this, folks, because frankly, they are not good at it. Finally, there's an interesting error in this movie, a very strange error. Normally in the end credits, you would see a little thing, Marvel has adopted this technique because they like it and it's fun, where after the credits, or right before the credits, it will say, James Bond will return in, and then it'll say the name of the next movie. This is because they made these movies so fast that they knew right away what the next movie would be. However, in this case, they did not know that. The next movie in the series is Moonraker. But the credits incorrectly tell us that James Bond will return not in Moonraker, but in For Your Eyes Only, which is 2 movies from now. If this had come out today, the internet would have crucified this poor movie just for that detail alone. I just think it's a fun little curiosity now. Even James Bond makes mistakes from time to time. Well, like heaven above me, that has been The Spy Who Loved Me. I really enjoy going on this journey with you guys here on Earth. But tomorrow, on the countdown, we have to make like Jeff, the Lex Luthor of our time, Bezos, and rocket into the stratosphere, because it's time to talk about Moonraker. See you tomorrow when the countdown to Bond 25 continues.